Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're going to take a look at the X-Racer X1 from FPVModel. It comes with Dragonfly 7mm motors, 14,000 kV, 31mm props, 48-channel VTX, F3 flight controller running Betaflight 3.1.5. It weighs 28.1 grams. It also comes with this nice carrying case, a USB charger, an extra set of props, extra set of mounting hardware for your canopy, stickers, and 2 batteries. This is a pretty good hoop, and I'm actually kind of impressed with their batteries as well. I've got some other batteries that are actually heavier than this that are only rated for 260 milliamp, and I got longer flight times with this, and your flight times are going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 minutes. Depends on how you're going to fly. You may fly faster, you may fly slower, you may be trying to do more punch-outs. I fly these almost exclusively in the house, and this particular one I did fly exclusively in the house. Initially I was a bit worried about the video reception. This is very, very similar to what we saw on another model that we reviewed on the channel. I think it was the KL1. It was a brushless version with a micro run cam on it, and I was unimpressed with the video reception, but this one I thought did quite well. You know, even when we swooped down into the basement and we run around our HVA system, the video remained pretty good as compared to other times I've flown other vehicles with different VTXs. The canopy is really light, but it's a little bit of a stretch. It doesn't just pop right off, you kind of have to work it off, but it's not a big deal. But they've done a nice job of encasing everything with that canopy. And I also had to correct my camera a bit. It came crooked, and you can see where they glue the camera in. I had to straighten that out a little bit. That wasn't a really big deal. How I did that was I just applied some heat with my heat gun on a low setting from a fair distance away. I didn't want to warm the plastic up too much, and then when it got a little bit malleable, I just kind of twisted it, and then I firmed it up with some little bit of hot glue of my own up top. Here you get a good look at the VTX. It is secured down with some sticky tape underneath there, and a couple things that are curious is if you can see this right here, if I can get this in view. that says bind, but this is the bind button up here. And this one over here is for changing our channels, and that's a little better labeled, I guess. But so this bind button might be for a different receiver. So if when you get yours, check both. If you don't get any activity from the bind button over here, try this one up front. But binding this with the FrSky was pretty simple. They also post PIDs on their site, but I tweaked those just a little bit, just for how I was wanting to have the machine respond. And that's something about PIDs. Right now we're looking at a time where the flight controllers are have so much processing power, and generally Betaflight is so good that you can oftentimes fly with the defaults, but you probably like to tweak them to make it feel like you want it to feel. Especially if you're an experienced flyer, you probably have a feel that you're looking for, so you may need to move those PIDs up and down. Also the rates, I like to fly with a really high yaw rate, probably has to do with the lack of dexterity in my left hand. But it's very clean. We can see we've got some soft mounting kind of going on here, but when you move the board, while these might be soft mounted, there isn't really any movement of the board, but that might help keep our damage when we crash down. So it can't hurt us. And then we've got our UFL connector here for our receiver as well. It's tucked neatly underneath. I think if you're looking for a whoop-like vehicle, something with ducted fans, and you don't want the view where you see the front of your hoops and your props, this is a really good model. And it's going to be dead simple because it's brushed. And I thought the 7mm motors made a pretty good difference between the traditional whoops that I fly, which are 6mm motors, and this one. I felt it has more response, and when I was flying in acro mode. And typically, with a brushed vehicle, flying in acro mode inside the house, or really even outside, is a little bit more challenging because as you're turning and coming around stuff, you're making constant throttle adjustments. And typically with a brush motor and 6mm motors, you really have to hit the throttle hard to make that correction impact, and it doesn't spin up the props quite fast enough for me in order to make those corrections or to fly the way I want to. But this one did pretty well. It flew somewhat similar to the brushless versions that I've featured on the channel. It's just a little bit smaller. Doesn't quite have the motor size, but it flew pretty well. A nice thing about the canopy being clear is we can see our lights on our VTX. The only thing it was really missing would be a super small micro buzzer. But keeping the weight down is paramount for these things, and we just don't have that in this case. You could probably find the pads on here somewhere and add your own if you really, really wanted to, but I just don't think it's necessary. One thing that I should mention is with this style, with the camera down in front and the VTX laying flat, your damage to any of the components that we traditionally have sticking up out of the center of our hoops is pretty much eliminated because it's a low profile and you've got this canopy up here for protection. So if you're suffering a lot of damage and that's frustrating you, you might want to look at something like this or this model itself. I'll put a link down in the description to this model. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please leave that in the comments down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.